All right, well, welcome everyone to another workshop here at the test camp. This is elementary education science. Let's discuss how learning and practicing test skills will empower your test confidence. Now, those of you joining us online, we wish you could be with us here in person, but you're welcome to contribute your comments anytime, and we're going to include them up here on the discussion boards. So thanks in advance for that. And if you join us directly through the Test Camp YouTube channel, of course, you can pause and restart or replay that video anytime. So again, this workshop is one of the 4 in our series for elementary education tests. We'll discuss the different types of tests used in different states and how science is tested. Feel free to ask questions here, and I'll repeat any of those for the people who are listening in to the recording here. All right, so you likely know by now that around here our motto is prepare, practice, then perform. And everyone who has successfully completed the training has passed their test. Now that's possible because test taking is a skill which requires practice, and this is the only place you can come to learn and practice these test skills. You match that with the content, gain the confidence, everybody passes. So to begin to prepare here at the test camp means understanding not only the test but understanding yourself. It's an honest assessment of how well you know the test content and your testing skills. So we start by learning the test blueprint. If you've participated in some of the other workshops, you know the blueprint provides all the information you need to fully understand your test. Now, how many here have participated in some of the other workshops or you watched it on demand? Okay, so we have a few. Assessing your knowledge of the blueprint is the first indicator of how well you're going to perform on the test, right? Because you'll know the content and you'll also know the rules of the test. How many questions, how much time allotted in that thing. Okay, so this can also be a good first step to creating what we call my study plan. This is simply a schedule that includes reviewing and studying the test content. All right, let's learn about the blueprint. And here's an overview of elementary education tests that's used in many states. Maybe not yours for those of you listening in, so you'll need to check and make sure that you are taking the correct test. But we can see here that this is a single test that has combined 4 subject areas. All right, these areas are listed on this table according to percentage of questions on the test. So if this is the test you're taking, it's important that you know the science accounts for 18%, or the least the number of questions on this test. So again, this is a single combined elementary education test. It has 140 questions and the time allotted is 150 minutes. So an average of just over 1 minute allotted for each question. Now here's an overview of a different elementary education test, also used in many states. This test includes questions about teaching and has a subtest in each subject area. See how that works? The science subtest has 47 multiple choice questions and the time allotted is 60 minutes. So if this is your test up there, it says content knowledge with teaching, you have an average of just over a minute for each question. Now here's another test used by some states. They're all a little bit different, and you'll want to know the elementary education test is required for your state. Now, are you required to take a single combined test, or can you expect a test with teaching questions and a subtest for each subject area? Well, in either case, the first step is to prepare by identifying what types of science questions you can expect to encounter on your test. Now, not what types of questions in terms of format. We know that all the questions are multiple choice. We're identifying today here the science competencies on which questions are built. And we provide practice on each competency with the quizzes over at the training centers. Now, the first quiz is based on the competency nature of science. So, taking a quiz based on this competency provides you instant feedback and points you in the direction to review and study. The second competency is physical science. Can you imagine what might be asked about this competency? Well, we're going to take a closer look, including some sample questions in just a few moments. The third competency is earth science, and you might be surprised to know what's included in this area, at least according to the test blueprints. Next is space science. Again, we'll look at some sample questions based on this competency in just a few moments. And since this test is for teaching professionals, teaching science is a competency that we can expect to find, and it can account for up to 20% a science education test, again, depending on the state. We'll discuss how teaching science is unique, especially in terms of student safety. But before we go any further, take a moment to introduce yourself to each other there at the tables, and then try to identify this final content competency that we skipped over here. All right, which one are we not talking about yet? If you still have time before you get back together, discuss the concepts that might be included in this subject area. All right, we'll come back as a group in just a moment. Well, thank you for joining us today. If you came to us live online, you can go ahead and share your thoughts, and we'll include them up here in the discussions. And if you're joining us by watching the pre-recorded video, this might be a good time to pause the recording and identify that last competency. We'll be here when you restart the video. All right, back up here. Which group identified the fifth competency? What do you have over here? Biology. Okay, good. On this test, though, they call it life science. So, same idea. It's a little bit more broad, you'll find here in just a few moments. And I heard your group discussions that this competency can cover a wide array of concepts, and you are correct about that. So we'll look at some sample questions that were built on this competency in just a few moments. Okay, let's begin examining each competency, beginning with nature of science up there. According to the test information guide, the skills related to this competency include understanding theories and laws of science, experiments that lead to a better understanding of those theories and laws, and the effects science has on society and culture. All right, here's our first sample question. All right, now let's see how many honest people we have here. Or hey, raise your hand now if you started here by reading the STEM. How many people, honest people? All right, we've got a few. Raise your hand if you started here at the answer set. Looking through the possible answers first. How many we have? Okay, quite a few. Now, why did you do that? Can you mind sharing that with everyone? I'll repeat it for the people who are listening in on the video. So you learned this strategy in the other workshops. All right. How does this help you on a test? You can become focused on the question, or in this case, the competency. Right? Very good. Thank you. All right, let's look at another sample question. Starting at the answer set down here. And one more sample question related to the nature of science. You can tell just by looking down here at the answer set, right? What are they going to be talking about? You got it. An experiment. All right, so that was the nature of science. Let's move on to the second competency, which is physical science. The knowledge you need to demonstrate on this test related to the physical sciences includes matter, the properties of matter and how matter changes, and also included is the knowledge of energy. Now, categories of energy represented on this test include chemical, electrical, and mechanical. Now let's look at a sample question. Okay, so this example is related to matter, right? Did you start by looking down at the answer set? All right, here's another sample question. Let's see if it's related to the physical sciences. Yes, it is. There you go. The word chemistry is right there in the STEM. All right, how about this next? Can you tell just by the answer set? What's the concept going to be? You got it. Matter. Right. This is a physical science question. All right, let's try one more of these. Remember, we're not trying to get the answers here today. We're just trying to figure out which competency is being tested. And here's the last one. Is this a physical science question? Yes, it is. Right. Energy. What type of energy? Electrical. Right. All right, that takes us to the third competency, which is earth science. Let's take time for you to work together and decide what knowledge might be expected about earth science. So make a list of the concepts that you think might be covered. We'll compare your list when we come back as a group. Hey, if you're joining us today live online, share your thoughts. We'll include them right here in the discussions. And if you're joining us on demand by the Test Camp YouTube channel, this might be a good time to pause the recording and test your knowledge about how earth science might appear on the tests. We'll be here when you return and restart the video. Alright, so we do have a lot of good ideas about how the competency earth science might be represented on this test. Everybody have your list ready? Okay, here we go. According to the test information guides, understanding earth science includes knowing about geology, the study of, right, the earth. Ology, the study of the earth. All right, more specifically, the physical structure of the earth and its history. Everybody had that one, geology? Every table, okay. So another concept then is atmosphere, the blanket of gas that surrounds the earth. That's how it's described in the guides. Right, so atmosphere is not about space, it's actually about earth on these tests. And can you imagine what other questions might look like in this area if you're talking about atmosphere? I know only a couple tables had it. What did you talk about? The spheres. Okay, so lithosphere, biosphere, that sort of thing. All right, good. So what do we have so far? Geology, atmosphere, and then the transfer of energy. Not just energy, but the transfer of energy. Anybody have an example of that at your tables there? Solar panels, okay? That's a transfer of energy from the sun into electrical power. Let's look at some questions from the test camp quizzes and see if you can identify them as being earth science. Here's the first example. Starting at the answer set. Okay, you can see why this is earth science, the study of the earth. Geology, right. Next sample question. Which concept is talked about here? Atmosphere, very good. All right, and here's another example. Yes, the word transfer is right there in the question, up in what they call the stem, right? So you might also be aware of another type of earth science question. How would you describe this? If you could just say it in one word. Sustainability. There you go. Anybody else have one? Recycling, conservation. Right, be on the lookout for these. They're becoming more and more popular on the test, as you can imagine. All right, let's look at the concepts related to earth science. Geology, atmosphere, and transfer of energy. We just looked at those. So the next competency then is going to be, anybody remember? After earth is space science, right? And here are the main concepts. Sun, earth, and moon, solar system, and space exploration. All right, let's take a look at some examples. Ocean currents, ocean tides, moon phases, the four seasons. Now let's look up top. Here's another sample question. Big Bang, Milky Way, solar system, universe. And one more. All right, so these were built not only on just science, but on space science. All right, are there any questions related to the competencies we've looked at here so far? Okay, yes, right over back there. I will repeat for the people listening to the video. Yes, they're asking about the questions, are they mixed? And so what you mean is these are all, well, like you said, mixed, right? We do provide separate quizzes for each competency, but on our practice test and on your test, yes, these will all be mixed together. They won't be in groups like this. Good question. All right, but on the quizzes, that makes it easier for you to decide where you might want to review and study. All right, so the next science competency then is life science. And like we mentioned earlier, what one word might represent this competency? Yes, biology, right. This might be the closest word, however, this competency, as you said back over at this table, has the most wide-ranging set of science concepts. So let's take time again for you to work through this together. And I'll give you a start here. Characteristics. This is just one piece of life science. Okay, how we better understand the plant and animal kingdom. All right. So it's your turn. What other characteristics, what other pieces of this competency, what other areas are there in life science? Okay, you see what we're talking about here. Okay, so it's your turn. What other areas of life science would be on this test? Discuss this at your tables. We'll compare your list with ours. All right, thanks again for those of you joining us live online. Share your thoughts and we're going to include them up here in the discussion. And if you're joining us on demand by the Test Camp YouTube channel, this might be a good time to pause the recording and test your knowledge of life science. We'll be here when we restart the video. By the way, the next piece is going to be classifications. All right, we'll be right back when you restart the video. Okay, we're back up here. Did any group come up with this? Classifications, all right, like kingdom, species, that's a phylum, was that one, right? All right, so we had some had that. How about evolution? A couple of groups had evolution. Did anyone say the life cycles? Nobody said life cycles. This is the developmental stages of growth in biology. Okay, so you did have it. You just didn't call it that. All right, let's look at, there's a couple more up here, I believe. Cell functions is one. Do you remember the three main cell functions? All right, well, we get into the specifics of all that over at the training area. And the last concept in this competency is environment. Your group had this one. Can you describe what you're talking about here, and then I'll repeat it for the people listening to the video. Okay, so environment means how plants and animals interact with each other or their surroundings. Okay. Let's take a look at some sample questions that represent life science. Starting at the bottom. All right. Here's another example. You can see how this is life science. I think we have one more here. All right, everybody's in the habit of starting down there in the answer set, right? On to the final competency, which is teaching science. And there are 8 main competencies related to teaching. However, only 4 really are represented on a science test. So here's the acronym that we use to help you remember the main teaching competencies. And the first one is planning for learning. Now, planning questions are most often related to achieving standards and benchmarks. You all know that. But on this test, the emphasis is going to be on safety. Science teachers are expected to think through all the procedures and equipment they need, especially when they're planning an experiment. The second competency then is environment, or more specifically, the learning environment. On other tests, the emphasis might be on creating more of a student-centered environment where the student feels comfortable, not threatened, safe. On this science test, the emphasis is also on safety. However, it's a different kind of safety. It's not mental safety, but it's physical safety. Okay? Make sure that the room is safe. The third competency is strategies for teaching. This is different than the planning. On this test, you might be seeing a trend. We're always talking about safety, it seems to be, and that's correct. That we will be on this time too. Safety refers to what the teacher is doing during the lesson when the students are present. So expect questions about that. And the final competency is related to assessment. All right, so what the focus going to be here? Differentiation. All right, so you might think of this as allowing students to feel safe about demonstrating their learning. Since you're the teacher, you allow for differentiated assessments. Okay, these might become clear with more sample questions. Let's go through the first one together, starting only with the answer set. Go ahead and take a moment and look at that. They're going to be predicting emergencies, identifying materials needed, equipment and emergency supplies are good. All right, and then assigning students to collect materials. This sounds like a question based on planning. I don't think we would be assigning students to do that. We're talking about safety. Here's another question based on teaching science. Again, I don't think you would be assigning students. How about another question based on teaching science? I don't like those with the word except in there. Okay. And here's one about assessment. So you have diagnostic, placement interviews, formative quizzes, summative exams. Let's look up top. All right, so those are just some examples. And here again are the competencies used by professional test writers to construct science tests. What do you know about the passing score for standardized certification tests? Yes, we said that before. Good for you. Each state is different and each test is different. Now the passing score here at the test camp is 80%. And this is a good target score, one that will ensure you pass your test because the state certification pass rates are always lower than this. You can expect to get a scale score probably on yours, but generally they're in 70%, in the mid 70s. Here's an example. Remember this first test we talked about. There's 140 questions on this combined test here. So you would need about 100 correct questions to pass the entire test. And by answering at least 20 or up to 25 science questions, that would contribute to the passing score. On this science subs test, you need to correctly answer about 35 questions. And on this test with the 55 questions, probably about 40 would guarantee you that pass. All right, let's look at this differently. Which would you choose? If you were to take a quiz today, which one of the quizzes would you consider less challenging? Is there a competency area that you consider more challenging here on this list, or one that's your stronger area, one that's less strong? And what does that mean for when you try to go ahead and review or study for a test like this? We'll discuss your preferences as a group when we come back. All right, if you joined us today live online, this is your last chance to share some of your thoughts. We sure appreciate it. You've helped us during the discussions. And if you're watching this pre-recorded workshop, pause the recording and do a little self-reflection. Which would you choose? Which is your most challenging area? And how do you prepare for a standardized test? Come back and join us anytime. You can restart that video. We had some pretty interesting discussion about the strategies for reviewing and studying for a standardized test. I think we can summarize by saying there's no right way. Everyone seems to be doing this a little bit differently. However, everyone agrees that they do need to review and study. And we can talk about that now, how to prepare for this test. Well, one way is you join this workshop. So now you've gained some knowledge about what to expect. Has that been helpful? All right, good. And you've learned a little about yourself too, right? Another way to prepare is to select the tools you might need, the most reliable resources. So expect to see this sign along the pathways during your training. Encouraging messages are posted by those who've gone before you. And in this case, their message is to avoid spending your time and money on expensive resources that you just don't need. Commercial webinars are a great example. Avoid paying for free test information and strategies that you just don't need. Expensive tutors and tutoring companies, that's another option that you just don't need. Maybe for a more challenging test, but certainly not for this one. Overpriced study guides I have up here now. Okay. Now that you know the competencies being tested, you can also use textbooks too. So you don't need the overpriced study guides. You can just go to textbooks instead. And now that you know the competencies being tested, you can also go to what's called My Resources area over in the training site. So these are the most popular and up-to-date tools that you can use to be successful. Again, many of the resources are either free or very inexpensive. Yes, that study guide up there, that's the one that's recommended by those who have gone before you and by our counselors, right? And look at the cost too, no paying $50 or $60. So their recommendation is not to invest time on resources or money on resources, but invest in yourself. Practice your test skills. Expect to gain confidence and personal independence that you can share with your students. Now, your pass provides admission to these training areas, and up there at the top is what's called My Test. That's the activity that enables you to check your understanding of the blueprint and everything we've discussed here today. And you can also take a pre-test right there in the My Test area before you start training. Now, this is the test camp problem solving system up here. The first step to finding the correct answer is to do what? Identify, right? That's what we've been doing here today. Identify the type of question according to the competency. Then we mentioned too, there's quizzes and tests. These provide an opportunity for you to practice your test skills while you're assessing your test content knowledge. And the quizzes are based on the competencies. So there they are. Yes, and the questions and answers, they change randomly on each attempt. And over in the test area, there's practice tests with features like you can expect on your test. There's a post-test that can help earn points towards a professional test certificate that you can earn, and that guarantees your success. Then expect to perform with confidence that comes from the knowledge and skills that you earned during the training. Right? So there's no better time than now. Let's empower your test confidence.